Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Career Sitrep. And happy Friday. It's Friday again, isn't it? This is the third one we've done, and we've got a lot to actually cover through the next few weeks, the next hour or so. Gosh, it's been an interesting 18 months, hasn't it? I know it's been pretty challenging, but the last 4 weeks have been very interesting from the economy, with jobs, vacancies increasing. And actually, frankly, right now, it's more of a job seekers market. A lot of employers are really now getting desperate to recruit veterans and service leavers, etc. So it's an interesting environment, very different from just a few months ago. But I think we need to recognise that the end of furlough is the end of this month, and inflation is starting to rise, and some employers will start to find it become more demanding quite soon. So that's going to have an interesting dynamic, and I'm sure we're going to be covering on it. So it's been an interesting period, and some sectors, of course, have really struggled during COVID. Some have actually done pretty well. Perhaps one of the ones which really has done incredibly well is in the logistics distribution, so transport area. And one company in particular has done an amazing job in recruiting and giving loads of opportunities for service leavers and veterans. And that, of course, is Amazon. So they did an awful lot last year, and they really have a huge military program. So today, ladies and gentlemen, welcome for joining with us on this afternoon. We're going to be talking about Amazon, about careers, and about transition and resettlement, etc. So I'm Alistair Halliday. I'm Chief Executive of RFEA, the Forced Employment Charity, supporting service leavers and veterans into roles. Part of that is within the Career Transition Partnership, and a lot of that is in veterans programs, which we've got around the UK. And so we're going to talk. This is a live stream going out live on YouTube, as well as Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you've got a question for us, do pop it in the box. Do ask us the questions. You'll be very pleased to know I'm not doing this all by myself. I've got a really lovely, strong team of excellent guests with me today. So first, I'm delighted to welcome and introduce Gillian Russell. So Gillian Russell is the global manager for the Amazon's military affairs program, now based in the US actually, but it was in the UK. It's been in Amazon for over 4 years, and for that worked for the US Chamber of Commerce, and also ex-Royal Navy logistics officer for about 17 years. Served at sea, HMS Nottingham as a logistics officer, as well as in Afghanistan on operations and some other roles. So tremendous background, both service and now post-transition in Amazon. So we really look forward to seeing and listening to hearing what you have to say. Great to welcome you, Gillian. And before I move on, I must also say that Gillian has also been nominated, and I'm embarrassed now, is in the top 100 women future leaders. Okay, so that's quite something. Anyway, and secondly, welcome James Moore, part of one of RFEA's, he's the the employment engagement manager, managing a team of about 13 people right across the UK, managing relations with about 9,500 companies. So last year, 80,000 roles, opportunities in the year. So huge background in dealing direct with employers across the UK. I've been doing that for about 5 years, haven't you, James? But then and before that, was in the army for 23 years, served in the Argyll and Southern Highlanders, and then also time in the Provost Marshal area for about 11 years or so. So lots of interesting things that I know James will be able to say. And then lastly, Hazel Savage. Delighted to welcome Hazel today. Really great to see you. Actually, quite recently left the army, so has gone through transition, and we really look forward to hearing what Hazel's got to say about her own experience there. Has now landed a cracking job in Amazon as an area manager, the area transportation manager in the West Midlands or around Nottinghamshire area, which is a brilliant role to jump straight into. So how you've achieved that will be very interesting to hear, I'm sure. For that, in the army, about 23 years, I think, Hazel, in the Royal Artillery, lots of roles, training gunners, etc. Ended up as the regimental sergeant major. I think it's pretty true to say the first female RSM in the Royal Artillery. So very well done. And now cracking through the first role in Civvy Street. So anyway, so that's who we have today for you, everybody. We've got about probably about an hour's chat. So do put questions into us. We're just going to have a conversation around these subjects. But actually, the first thing I'd really like to do before we get into more gellings about is just perhaps we'll have a chat about how we are founded ourselves. We've all four of us have all served. We've all been through transition. So perhaps just what did we feel? How did it go? What were the things which worked really well, and the things which didn't so much, and any other tips? I know, Gillian, what was your sense of that?
Yes, well, nice to see everybody. Thanks very much for letting us occupy your Friday afternoon. So I left probably just about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit, sort of like longer than that. This isn't an advert for the CTP, James, but actually when I went through the Career Transition Partnership workshop, and I think probably in those days it was like around about the start of when we were actually doing workshops properly, that I found that process really quite interesting, and in fact found my first job through the CTP. So, when I left, I worked for a round the world yacht race, which is a totally different story, but we can talk about that. But that was through the CTP. But actually, that transition, I thought, oh, I've got this. This isn't difficult. I understand how it's going to work. I'm kind of like, I've got friends who are civvies, so this can't be that difficult. And I think that it took a while to actually realise that it wasn't the same, and actually that I needed to really sort of like have a think about how, one, I was sort of missing that environment. I was missing the environment where people understood exactly what I wanted straight away, and I didn't have to really explain myself, and that I really needed to change my management style and the way that I sort of like that I worked, because it wasn't a direct correlation. There's so many of the things that were so that made me a strong candidate for the job, and the things that are core to me now were there, but doing things in exactly the same way as I'd done before wasn't going to sort of like make me successful in my career.
That's a very interesting thing, Gillian, and I think we'll come back to that whole theme about the making that transition of knowing the stuff which has worked in our military careers, and then what then works in a different environment. I think we'll come back to that. And Hazel, you've been the most recent sort of to come out. How was it for you then?
Yeah, sure. So again, I'm an advocate of the CTP, everything they offer. I think what I would say is that you need to go out there and do some of that work for yourself. That it's not gifted to you. Of course, the facilities, the resources are all there, but you have to go and find your way a little bit. Make sure to make connections with people. Get on LinkedIn early, before you're thinking to leave. Get on LinkedIn. People maybe are a little afraid and worried about the perception of that in your current workplace, but just go ahead and do it. You need to make those connections and use them through your CTP. Also using your learning credits, making sure that you know what you are entitled to, taking advantage of it. Again, nobody's going to do the work for you, but just have a look, research, make connections with people, and understand what's out there and what you can do to help yourself.
That's very interesting. I mean, you mentioned about taking responsibility for yourself, and it's a key thing, isn't it? I think there's so much support out there. But and James, how was your own transition?
So I left about 5 years ago, and again, like Gillian and Hazel, there was two main things that I struggled with, and one was loyalty to obviously my regiment. Being in a fairly senior position, I had troops under me that I was managing, and I really put all of my sort of transition on hold effectively, because I didn't want to be disloyal to my regiment. And that's a theme that I really struggled with, because as we joined, many of us joined very young. We're always taught the sort of selfless commitment part of the values and standards, and that I really struggled with that. And then the other part was finding exactly what I wanted to do, the direction I wanted to take, because I'd had so many jobs and opportunities within the military, from training to operations to policy. I was sort of, my brain was all over the place, and I found it very difficult to focus on one sort of career path and strength really to go down. And the career consultants were fantastic at sort of getting all that energy and pointing me in the right direction. So that's what I struggled with.
It's an interesting point about the choice. I mean, when you start off, there's huge choice, and how do you narrow that down into various sectors? And of course, hopefully today we're going to help with narrowing down in this particular sector, obviously in the whole Amazon space. which would be, say for me personally, I mean, the initial transition I was straightforward. I mean, I went to a Raytheon, a big company. That was great, but after about 4 years, needed to move on, and that was then I found it really quite tricky, and having to sort of go through all the process again, etc. So it's there's an initial transition which may or may not go pretty smoothly, and then there's other things which sort of cut in later on. But I think there's some really great themes there. I think with taking ownership, and thank you that the LinkedIn user, whoever you were, you put in that, you completely endorsed that thing about taking ownership. Great lot of support out there. We've all got to make sure that we are really in the end trying to take charge of our own futures. And then another good point from James about loyalty. Difficult to tear yourself away from the regimental core. That is a key thing, which again I'm sure everyone has the same experience. It was for me, because we're very busy in our service careers, and if you're in the position where you're looking for your role, to move out, keeping on top of something which you feel very dear about is quite a challenge. I think that's a very interesting thing about perhaps all four of us. Hopefully that was helpful for everybody. I think we're just taking the theme about our own experiences and then move on more generally to think about what is it then, why employers think that it is useful to have people from the armed forces. What skills do we bring, let's say? I mean, I don't know, Gillian, I think you're all over this actually, aren't you? In Amazon, you can recognise the attributes of why is it that veterans are really good to employ for a civilian employer?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of things that are very strong about what we bring to the employment space, and I think at Amazon we've got these things called leadership principles, and we have 16 leadership principles. And when I read them, I was like, gosh, yeah, I think that I do that, and I sort of can see that I fit those roles all the time. And when I think about them, we have things like bias for action is one of our leadership principles. Ownership is one of our leadership principles. Hire and develop the best, so developing your people is one of our leadership principles. So those things. So I think it is, what we bring is years of understanding that training is really important and deploying that training really quickly. We're incredibly adaptable. We absolutely can hit the ground running in what we're doing because we have to. We understand the value of teamwork, but also how you can be a leader and different styles of leadership as well, and what to deploy in different situations. The one thing I say, one of the things that I say a lot to maybe our hiring managers at Amazon that don't have that background in the military or don't really understand, and they have this stereotypical image of what we're like because they think it's all shouting and marching, and they don't really understand the nuances of what a military career is actually about. So say the amount of leadership and management training that we get from the very first second that you join, when you step off onto the parade ground at Pirbright or Sandhurst or, Dartmouth or Cranwell or wherever, and you're sort of standing there in the rain, that it starts then. And the amount of investment that we have in us as individuals to be adaptable, to be great leaders, to be great managers, to be empathetic, to understand how to make your team work is something that a graduate that's joining the company doesn't have. It doesn't have and will never have. And so I think those are the things that employers are looking for. They don't necessarily understand that is the complete package is there in that military individual. But we as the larger that we become, and the more that we participate in these kind of events and wider, we start to really show those skills. And there's a lot of research that's done by companies like the Forces and Mind Trust and Deloitte saying, these are the skills that we bring. And companies are starting to notice that and pick up.
I mean, it's great to hear, Gillian. I mean, I know it's clear, frankly, by the tremendous record Amazon has over the last few years, in particular, in actively recruiting service leavers and veterans. And so obviously, as a company, Amazon really gets this, doesn't it? I mean, James, do you get the same sense of more widely across the UK? I mean, clearly, all the companies I think who you probably deal with are already incentivized to have veterans on their teams. But how do you think about that, James?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my role and in the team's role that I manage, we speak to employers, thousands of employers yearly, and it's all about the it makes business sense to employ the veterans, because they do bring a whole different dynamic to the party, to the organisation. We talk a lot about, especially in this day and age, about resilience, about being multi-skilled, about getting a task finished, seeing a task out to the end. These are all things that are hugely popular with employers. The technical skills that we've got, there's a much, much better understanding of the technical skills in the military as well now, and the whole accreditation piece and what it actually means. And employers understand more now than probably ever about employing veterans and service leavers and the business need. And Gillian mentioned a few of the organisations that have helped us along the way. Veterans work is a huge piece of work that's done over a number of years, which is helped massively to improve that message about, veterans bring more to the party than the technical skills. It's a transferable skill. So understanding your transferable skills as well, and really highlighting them to make you stand out from the crowd.
It's such a key thing, isn't it? I mean, clearly there are many people who are pretty well qualified already, certainly technically, and that is one thing. But it's and actually I was at DSEI yesterday, the big defence equipment exhibition in the Excel, huge, big defence industry, and a lot of people I knew, a lot of people you meet, and a lot of them have just marched straight into these roles using directly their skills. But as you say, James, it's much bigger than that, isn't it? It is the wider skills, more general skills that people have served in, which Julian was mentioning, which actually employers are really after. And sometimes I wonder how much do our service leavers and people who are serving really understand what their attributes are? I don't know, Hazel, what's your sense, having recently come out? Did you feel that you knew, frankly, what employers would be looking for? And do you think your other mates, etc., in the regiment and other people you knew, do people understand it when they're still serving?
No, I don't think so. I certainly didn't. I think going back to both of the points that were made by Gillian and James, talking about, I look around here now and I see a lot of the graduate area managers who, whilst they are very intelligent people, they just don't have the skills that we have developed in the military over 10, 15, 20 years, just to be able to speak to another human being with compassion, with empathy, but at the same time still be able to, in Amazon terms, deliver results. That is what it is all about. And we want military people to come and do this because that's what we've been doing for our careers. When it's 3 o'clock in the morning and 200 sandbags need filling, then we're going to do that. And they want people that will come and deliver the result regardless of the conditions that they are working in. Clearly at Amazon we will be provided with the best equipment and conditions to work in, but regardless, this is what we want. I would also say that don't be put off by, if you're seeing an application that says you need qualification A, B or C, don't be put off by that. There's definitely room for manoeuvre. Not always, but in most cases. And if it's something that you think will enhance and you want to go away and do it, of course. If not, then get your foot in the door and then revisit, and you can do it now, which is what I'm doing. So don't just look at something and think, well, I don't have that qualification, so I won't apply. Just go ahead, apply, and let somebody else make that decision. So they would be my 2 bits of advice.
That's brilliant, Hazel. I mean, actually, that's such a great point. That and actually, employers. I mean, we've actually been on a bit of a campaign, and we were quite successful a couple of years ago. This is RFEA, but also in an employment cluster, and we got some change in the legislation to have guaranteed interviews. We were trying to push much more widely, and in the end, it came out in some government departments. But hopefully, that will be rolled out, because we know that despite what's on the job spec and what's the requirement, quite often, if a veteran or a service leaver can get in front of an employer, wow, they are think, blimey, well, definitely take them, because they can see these things. And so quite often and there's the whole point about, what's the CV about, is to get you across the line into that interview. Once people are in the interview, the success rate is much higher than it would be otherwise. So that is a great point. And also, I think it's true. I think, and for myself as well, when I was serving, I don't think we ever we understood why what we were doing in day-to-day business was valuable to a civilian employer. And Yeah, no, it's a very interesting point. Another LinkedIn input here. Somebody's going through transition now. Massively apparent military undersell themselves. Many are playing down what is normally expected. See, a creator as a workshop, speakers will employers certainly helps. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think we all do play these things down, don't we? Because I think naturally we're all used to being team players in the armed forces. You know, whether it's in a unit level or or larger, and we play down the individual because it somehow doesn't sound right. We're team
We
players.
Sorry, Alistair, I just want to sort of like jump in on that there, because I think that it is a really important thing to emphasise, and it sort of it goes into all of the things that we've talked about, and also in interviewing as well, because we're we, talk about ourselves as we, and we don't, and when you're in the military, if you ever said, I did that. Oh, I'm an I great. I did that. People would be like, oh, like check you out, whatever. But you know, sort of like, and then they'd be like, But you know, in an interview, you're not interviewing your team. Your team is not coming with you. It's you, and you're the only person that's going to get the job. And so, as awkward and as you know, sort of like goes against absolutely everything that you feel, sort of like internally, you have to talk about yourself, and you have to really, really be able to articulate what you've done and how you achieved it, and the things and the thought process that you went through to get there. One of the biggest criticisms that we get from our interviewers is that military people say we. When they don't mean we, they mean I did that. But they're so, and we are so, it's so alien for us to say, I did it. And the thing is, the crazy thing is that when you then get into your job, then of course the same thing applies. And Hazel and I will both say we when we mean our team, but we're also talking about what we did. But in an interview, the only person that is going for that job is you. And you have to talk about you.
Yeah. That's great. And Gillian and I talked tonight about interview preparation, particularly if you're going through to panel. And I know there are things got on here about the interview process in more detail. But again, you have to open that process with yourself. Nobody's going to stand up the panel for you. Nobody's going to prepare the phone screening for you. There's so much advice out there. You can reach out. In the company, you will be provided with a military mentor before you've even stepped foot inside the building. So I had one when I was coming here. So they will talk you through that whole process. But please, just reach out through LinkedIn, and if you need advice, it's there. But you must prepare for that.
That's a great one.
To be scared of, but you must prepare.
That's a great one, Hazel, and thanks. I'm sorry, guys, if we had a bit of feedback. It seems to have got better now. And actually, Nicola, just before that, well done. Thank you. Totally endorsing that I and we point. I think it's a very good point. So in a way, there's a real sort of strong message in here. It's, yes, when you're going through transition, people need to reflect that we need to be more individual in terms of the application. Then once you're through and you're into the role, frankly, teamwork again is a key part of our skill set, isn't it? So you don't then overplay don't suddenly think you've got to be me after that, because you still be a thing. So I just missed that last question, that last point. Actually, you can shove it up again. Hi, it's from Lorraine. Great advice. Service leavers often back away from roles if they don't meet 100% of the spec. Employers can teach skills and they need attitude. I mean, that's just a key one. I know we touched on that just now, and I think it's that have confidence in going for something, even if it's not 100%. Some employers may well not. People may be sifted out, but that is changing. So don't let it put you off, in particular.
Yeah, Alistair, can I just come in there? That's one of my biggest frustrations speaking to service leaders and veterans. We've got a real thing about talking ourselves out of roles, rather than talking ourselves into the role. We talk ourselves out of the roles, and it's so frustrating. And you know, one of the biggest bits of advice I'll give you is a job description or a job advert is what the golden standard they want, because that person might not need any training or fit straight in, but that never happens. That's in a fantastic utopia of a world. Go go for it. If you think you can do that job, you go for it. Stop talking ourselves out of roles. It's just one of our biggest frustrations with the whole sort of service defence community.
And I'm completely sorry, Alistair, to jump in, but I completely and totally endorse absolutely everything that James said. I mean, there are some things that you need to have. If the job says you need to have a bachelor's degree or equivalent, then that means you do need to have a bachelor's degree or equivalent. And the equivalent in the UK is your leadership and your level 6, leadership and management. A lot of people go, oh, I don't have a degree, so I can't apply for this. It's like, yeah, but you have got your ILM leadership and management, and the CTP tells you that. But there are a lot of those basic skills. It says you need 3 years experience, then you have to have 3 years experience. But the preferred skills are the bit that is completely negotiable. But the other thing that service people do is they hide all of these great attributes in their resumes, in their CVs. And so they will bury some of those key qualifications down on page 5. Well, it never gets read. Page 1 and 2, and everything is read by humans at Amazon. But if it's not there front and center, then we can't tell. So that elevator pitch that you have in your that first paragraph in your CV, you have to tailor it for every single role that you apply for. And where those basic qualifications are, you just stick it in the first paragraph. I have a bachelor degree, or I've got my leadership and management level 6, 3 years work experience in this and this and this. And so the recruiter has no choice but to have to interview you for the role. Because why would they turn down someone who's got it all?
Completely. And actually, I think it also comes back to this point about, if you don't actually have some requirement on the thing, the good employers will be able to go beyond that. And it comes back to, I think, James's point about training. And Gillian, you said this as well. Everyone has been trained. And we perhaps say this, it sounds as if we overstate it, but it's not just about, major training things. Even the most junior infantry soldier has had a whack of training. Nobody else ever gets that going into in any company. And also it means that we're used to being trained. We're trainable. So on day one of a new job, they might say, oh, by the way, this is part of the job. So, oh, right, okay, I haven't checked that, but I'll learn how to do it very quickly. And that's what people can do. And so I think when you're serving, you don't necessarily realize that is a real skill which is ingrained in people who served, and that frankly can give everyone confidence to really go for it for some of these roles. I think before we move on, it was interesting, just occurred to me now really about the last year and about COVID and about what's been going on in the country, and then who is good and who is thriving. And clearly the job market and employers are seeing people who are resilient, can work well under pressure, can get up in the middle of the night or difficult hours, etc. There's this group from the armed forces. It's been a huge, great example. I mean, we've seen it in people actually still serving, doing these testing places and supporting the NHS, as well as more widely than that. So I think it's been another interesting period to demonstrate, frankly, the value that veterans can bring. And I think it's another important thing to say, and again, Gillian, you might have a view on this, but I think people need to realise that we're not expecting employers to be take pity on veterans. They don't need to. It's good for the bottom line. So people, we're not encouraging employers to go out there and so employ people to say, oh, well, bless, you need to take to a couple of people from the armed forces. It's not the case at all. It's you take somebody who's served, it's going to be good for your company, for the leadership, the resilience, for the team skills, all of the things that we're talking about. Good for the bottom line. Is that what you think, Gillian?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry about that. Another meeting. No, it's 100. That's 100% true. So, Amazon, we have this thing called the hiring bar. So we expect everybody that joins the company to be 50% better than you, basically. So we are continuously raising the bar. It doesn't stop, and we are not looking for. So I probably wouldn't get into Amazon if I joined now because it's sort of moved on so much. But, because of that, so there is absolutely no, oh, well, let's just give a few jobs out to people who are in the armed forces. The bottom line for Amazon is our customers. and how we deliver on behalf of our customers. And that is the only thing that matters. And doing that in a way that makes sure that, sort of like, and we have this saying at Amazon, we've got a lot of sayings at Amazon, but one of the sayings is work hard, have fun, make history. And so what we do is we do work hard. There's no doubt about it. And, we can talk about that a little bit later in Culture at Amazon. But while we do it, we have fun, because that is the only way that you're actually really going to enjoy your job. And we're making history every day because it's on behalf of our, customers, faster, cheaper, sort of like, when I'm here in the US, Amazon Prime is 2 days in the US. I'm like, what? Why am I waiting for 2 days for my Amazon Prime stuff? Because, in the UK, I can get it delivered in a day, or in some places within, 2 hours. And so we're continuously raising the bar of how we support our customers. Now, the way that we do that is by hiring the best. And so this isn't something that is like you said, a nice to do thing. We don't do anything because it's nice to do. We do it because we help our customers. Yeah. And that is the bottom line. And military people around the world, so not just in the UK, but around the world, help us to do that. And we make really big and bold commitments about, sort of like about hiring military and reservists and military spouses, so it's that military community. But in the US this year, we announced 100,000 more jobs on top of, I think we're probably around about the 68, 70,000 mark of veterans around the world. So this is not something that's going away. It's just going to get bigger.
Yeah, and absolutely brilliant. And we're going to come into sort of the whole the packages and everything in a second. I think we were talking about training just now, and actually there's another thing about leadership. And Hazel, your sense, again, do we overplay this? I don't think we do, but I don't think sometimes when we're serving, we don't really understand. Everyone has experienced leadership, again, from a very young, you don't have to be senior folk to be great leaders. From very junior levels, people are doing it. And it's not just about leading, it's also about being able to be led. And again, a lot of people aren't used to that, certainly you've not experienced in companies. Employers want people to be future leaders, but also to be good team players and to be led properly. Is that your sense, Hazel, as well, from your time from the army and then going into Amazon as well?
Yeah, I think I'll go in reverse order. And again, we had this conversation the other day, Gillian and I. So I think what's important is so from my perspective now, when Amazon is hiring you, they are hiring you into a role that sets you up for future success. It is not about putting you in at a level where maybe you're not going to succeed and therefore have to be taken back down. It's about setting you up for success. That may mean that the level at which you enter is not the level at which you think is best for you because you finished as a captain, a major, an RSM, whatever it may be. So I think it's important not to make the assumption, don't undersell yourself, of course, but don't make the assumption that those are directly relative and that you're going to go in at a certain level just because that's what you were in when you were in the military. It's about making sure that you are able to follow the path to success in a measured way, and also give yourself time to transition correctly as well, right? Because you're still going through that process. It's not ending. Day one at Amazon is not like the end of when you finish in your military career. You still have links to it. So I think that's important to mention and just be mindful of. I think tying this in with the CV and what you have experienced, it does not matter whether you've been in the military for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 20 years. Of course, the levels of experience you have differ, but as a corporal deployed on an exercise in Kenya, you have led a section of men and women, on overseas operations or exercises. And you can write that in a CV as saying led a section, or you can really blow that up. And yeah, obviously you're going to overdo it a little bit, but there's nothing wrong with that too. So really make sure to highlight, showcase, show yourself off. Things like organising functions in the military, which are part of our daily routine. Other people maybe are not doing those things. So you're organising events sometimes for hundreds or thousands of people as a regimental sergeant major in the army. So, you know, you need to make sure to talk about those things.
It's a great point about, you don't have to be a senior NCO or a senior officer or whatever. I mean, as you say, corporal. I mean, you think about, and I've met quite a few people who have not served in various companies, and they might be aged about sort of 30. They say, "Oh, right, I'm now managing 2 people." I say, well done, that's great. But actually, we've got 19, 20-year-old young infanteers who are, you know, with their sections, you know, doing it in very difficult, dangerous things. You think of the experience of, you know, the paras out in Kabul airport recently. I mean, crikey, the experience they got and how that builds them up as individuals is really key. Yeah, I'm sure you. What's your sense on that, James? I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, just to pick up again on Hazel's point, the other thing that we undersell is, you know, as a Lance Corporal, you might be in charge of 4 people, but how much monetary worth is the kit and equipment that they 4 people have got? You know, in some corps and some regiments and on ships, you know, that could equate to millions of pounds. You know, as a 19, 20-year-old out in industry, you're never going to be in charge of millions of pounds worth of equipment and you know, the stuff that we use. And I think that we really forget about that piece of it because it's part of the job. It's just the job. It's my bit of equipment. Digital skills as well. The amount of people who say, "Oh, I haven't got any digital skills," and then you sort of dive into it and say, "Well, what communication systems do you use?" "Oh, I use this." "Well, that's all digital nowadays." "I use this weapon system." "Well, that's digital." So, you know, it's that lack of understanding of how valuable that is, you know, to go to an employer and say, "I was in charge of this bit of equipment, which is worth millions of pounds. I had to test it, inspect it, make sure it worked." That's all huge skills that just aren't out there in industry at our, you know, sort of junior level, lower levels.
Completely. No, it's good. So in a way, I suppose we should be talking about lots of these skills and attributes which service leavers and veterans need to be aware of and to be able to bring it to our employers. And let's sort of turn more now specifically about Amazon. And I know many people know a lot about Amazon. They bought stuff from Amazon and all the rest of it. They've got a perception about what it is. And I know this, but it's much bigger and broader than what most people think in terms of the opportunities. It's not just about, you know, dare I say, you know, so the warehousing or the books or whatever. There's a huge amount of opportunities. So, Gillian, give an overview about the sort of roles which exist there.
Well, yeah. So, how long have we got left?
Well, yeah.
No, sorry, I'm joking. You're absolutely right, Alistair, because people think about Amazon, and the bit that they see of Amazon are the boxes that arrive on your doorstep. And the number of people when I used to go along to the CTP fairs that would say, well, what can Amazon do for me? Which actually is the wrong way round, of course. But also, I don't want to be a driver. And I'm like, well, actually, we don't employ drivers. So sorry, even if you wanted to be, you couldn't be. So Amazon is one of the big 4 tech companies. We are a tech company, and that is the bottom line. We're just a tech company, the same as Apple, or Google, or Facebook, or wherever. It's just that our product, you know, sort of like what we deliver in the tech space is boxes to people's front door. And everything that goes behind that is what is at Amazon. So our operations division is massive, and that is what you see is quite visible. On, you know, if you're driving up the M1, you'll see some of our massive fulfillment centers, which are our warehouses. But we also own the middle and the last mile of that as well. So we have our Amazon Transportation, our line haul, and we have our delivery stations where we're actually sort of getting that. And that is absolutely a lot of that is logistics, but it's also it's operations. So it is leading teams of people to deliver. Behind that, as you can imagine, in a very complicated environment, we have huge numbers of engineers that are, you know, like absolutely operating and maintaining all of our all of our equipment. And then on top of that, everything is controlled by data. Absolutely everything at Amazon is about data. And so not even that, you know, we have our own company, which is called Amazon Web Services, that was set up to first off to sort of like supply the data demands and the cloud computing demands of Amazon. But because, you know, you don't sort of like build your system to be at capacity all the time, you know, we have capacity, and that capacity is now sort of like powering so many things around about the world. We have very large contracts with the UK, the MOD, with the NHS, and we are sort of like, looking after our customers in that cloud computing world. And then, so if I go back to our customer fulfillment, our operations side, that doesn't happen. A lot of the stuff, not everything, but a lot of the stuff that is sold on Amazon is owned by Amazon. So we have buyers, we have consumer teams, we have business-to-business teams that are going out there and buying and looking at what is next year's colour of garden furniture and making sure that it's going to be delivered in time for Christmas next year or the summer in 2023. And we have financiers, we have lawyers, we have, obviously, because we're a massive company, we have a whole load of people that work in HR, we have health and safety, we have loss prevention, so there is, if you think about every single aspect of what we do in the military, there is an equivalent and more in Amazon. And, part of, we are recruiting massively, and the pandemic has definitely, moved that on a little bit. But if I say about this is how quickly Amazon's grown. When I started at Amazon 4 years ago, 300,000 people worked at Amazon. Big company, a lot of people, but that's around the world. Now it's 1.3 million people work at Amazon. 4 years, 1 million people have joined after me. And that is how, so part of the reason how we can move so quickly is that we do hire the best people. We have a lot of military people that are in there. We have our leadership principles, which is our sort of like glue, our training that holds us together. But fundamentally, it comes to having the right people with the right mindset who want to be on this journey. That's what makes Amazon what it is, and how we could very quickly pivot to, sort of like massively increasing our deliveries. Sort of like during the pandemic, Amazon Fresh stores, sort of like really ramping up our like grocery delivery and, all of that tech space that's behind it. Huge developments in our sort of like in our cloud computing world as well. Just, exponential growth.
It's fascinating, Gillian, because the things is the spread of roles and departments and all the rest of it, which exist in the company, are quite mind-boggling, really. I think there is a common theme here for people who are listening. I remember the first career Sitrep it was with the NHS, and again, similar thing, that most people think the NHS is full of clinicians, doctors and nurses, to put it slightly crudely, but of course that's about half of it. The rest of it is project managers and all the rest of it, and it now strikes me that Amazon has got a very similar thing, huge different subsets of specializations, and with each one needs a project manager, it needs logistics, it needs drivers, it needs all huge amounts of skills. So I think there's a message here that when people are looking at areas to go into, just in your research, do go into the next level and do talk to people to understand, because it might be that some of these industries and some of these sectors which you think, no, I'm not interested, I don't know anything in common, you do, and I think Amazon's a very good example of that. Yes, and I suppose, Hazel, you probably didn't think initially, going back a year or so ago, that you'd be going to Amazon necessarily, but I don't know, or perhaps you did.
I had an idea that this is what I wanted to do, and one of the reasons for that is I knew that whatever role I went into after I finished my military career, I didn't want to feel like a fish out of water. I wanted to be somewhere where I was with like-minded people, where I was still part of the military community, and Amazon has, there are a number of them, 14, I think, affinity groups. So you will become a member of an affinity group from before you're even arriving, and you'll have huge networks both at site and global levels to keep you in touch with people from your community. So you're never more than a message away from any assistance that you might need. But back to your original point, I didn't think I would be at Amazon. I knew that I wanted to be, and started to work on that. Touching on James's point as well, whilst I was still in my previous role, and I understand the difficulties that presents. But ultimately, if you've made the decision that that's what you want to do, then you have to, in Amazon terms, disagree and commit and get on with the decision that you have made. But yeah, I am very glad that I'm here now. I think I'll quickly touch on data if that's all right, because it's not something in the military that we are necessarily used to. It is at the centre of everything we are doing. Again, not something to be afraid of, but just something to maybe get your head around and start to feed into any CV work or any preparatory work you're doing for interviews. Is just get used to working with data. If you're not very good, reach out for assistance. I include myself in that as well. So yeah, definitely something to consider when you're working towards interviews is using data. I think as well, the roles, there are so many things that you can do. I didn't necessarily think that I was going to end up in the transportation area, but now, you know, I'm so glad that I am. I'm right there delivering like packages to our customers, and that's what I'm happy about. Christy, has anything surprised you about working for Amazon? So I think it's probably a good time to talk about some of the things, maybe dispel some rumours about around working hours and working conditions rather than shy away from it. So depending on what role you're going into and whether you're on hourly or if you're on salaried, there are variances, but the working hours can be longer than you might expect. Gillian touched on it. You are going to work hard. Shift work is something that maybe you would need to consider as well. I'm working Monday, Friday days at the moment, so I'm in dream world, in utopia, as James would say. But that's not always the case. Most likely, you're going to be on a 4-day shift pattern, either Sunday, Wednesday, or Wednesday through Saturday, and that will vary days or nights. I think the surprising thing is just the amount of support that is there for you. At site and global level. It's not unusual to be having conversations with people from all over the world about projects you're involved in different time zones, and just the network that creates for you. So in the military, we stick in our regiments, batteries, and so on and so forth. But here at Amazon, the reach is global, and you'll be involved in projects that are happening all over the world. That's better for you. It's going to develop you. For sure. But yeah, working hours can be tough. You need to learn to prioritize very quickly. There'll be maybe 50 things on your to-do list that you're not going to do that day. But that's fine. Like, it's okay as long as you're speaking to your manager about it. It's no trouble. So yeah.
That's very interesting, Hazel. I mean, and actually, as you say, I mean, a lot of people will completely resonate with that, you know, with it, you know, difficult hours and stuff. I mean, in a way, again, people have had the right background, haven't they, for going through that in the armed forces. I'll come back to one other thing you just said a moment ago about, you know, it was great having the sort of the military network within Amazon, and I think it's worth saying about the need to in transition to be able to move on and embrace the new workplace, the new, you know, commercial environment, because every area, unless you go back to something directly within the military, you know, even if you're outside, is going to be different. And I think there's something around this, because I think some people perhaps do struggle more than others, that if they're always looking backwards. So I think perhaps the trick here is to be proud of our service, what we've done, achieved in the armed forces, and still keep our links with our friends and everything. It's great having a network, as you've got in Amazon, but also to embrace the different culture. And I think it is very important to, frankly, move on to the next stage in life, and to make ourselves, you know, to give ourselves the best chance in the next exciting period. But I think that's an interesting point you said there, Hazel. That's very useful. Yeah. So I mean, I suppose we've covered so many things over the last 45 minutes or so. I mean, if we're sort of coming up with our really sort of top tips or our key bits of advice, and perhaps we've articulated a lot of these things anyway, but what would we say are our real the major things? Certainly more generally, but also particularly for somebody interested in going to Amazon potentially as well. I don't know. So, Gillian, what was your go on this?
Well, so I think the top tip is that finding a job is a job in itself. You can't just, you know, sort of like think that you can puff it off or leave it until the last minute, you know, because if you do that, then, you know, you'll not be setting yourself up for success. And I think it's really important to really take the time to sort of like reflect on what excites you about going to work. And, if you can find that in your sort of like in your, your daily role as well, then that's really important. And it's not necessarily, it's like, it could be that it is working with people. It could be that it is, sort of like helping people out. I think that, so if I just go to Amazon, there's a couple of things that I just wanted to say. So we know that there are some roles at Amazon that are very suited for people that come from a military background. And we know that, and and Hazel is like demonstrating that in absolute massive, great, sort of like handfuls. So our operations division, and we have at Amazon, we have military recruiters that recruit for those specific roles. And the reason why they do that is because we have so many people that it justifies having a dedicated recruiters to do those jobs. But that doesn't mean that the rest of Amazon is not open to you. And I think that is the thing to do. And if you're interested in just expressing an interest in Amazon and finding out more, then we have a talent pool that you can apply to, where you can upload your CV and you can sort of like, just say, hey, yes, this is sort of like, this is me, I'm interested in jobs at Amazon. Don't limit yourself to what you've done before, because, your skills, we've already said, we've labored this point, are transferable. But like I said, what are you passionate about? What's the sort of thing that you're going to want to do? And look at in the broader sense, it's like, look at what are the guiding principles of your, of the company that you're applying to. Do they make sense to you? So like when, Hazel and I read the leadership principles at Amazon, I'm like, that's it. That's exactly what I did. That's what I want to, that is what I want to do. So, so when I'm just sort of like looking at this, does Amazon offer a direct approach route to a particular role? So we have a whole range of interactions with the transitioning population and with veterans. So we have our own insight days where you can sign up. We're doing them all online at the moment. You can go along to a career transition fair and you can talk to recruiters and veterans as well who are serving at Amazon. You connect with us on LinkedIn and just chat with us. So we don't have, it's not the roles that people apply to. So say in operations, they're not ring fenced for military. It's just that our recruiters form part of the larger recruiting pool. So there might be 100 jobs in that site that are looking for, those skills. Our recruiters, our military recruiters, will maybe say they've filled 10 of those roles. We do have military pathways, which is our fast track management program. So that's another thing to think about. But we also have internships and apprenticeships as well. And I this is something I'm very passionate about, is that lots of people from the military are like, I'm not 16. I don't need to have an apprenticeship. That's not what apprenticeships are about. Apprenticeships are learning the skills while you are getting paid. I mean, why on earth wouldn't somebody want to do that? I don't understand. And Amazon has, I think it's something like 12,000 apprenticeships across the EU at all different levels. We have level 3 apprenticeships all the way up to degree level apprenticeships in everything from Amazon fashion to engineering. And we're also putting in some ring fencing some of those roles to say we military candidates are preferred for these roles. And we have the internships I mentioned. We're just starting internships in Amazon Web Services, where these are for people who are still serving, who are in their transition, who will come and do a placement with us for 3 months. They will get the AWS cloud computing certification at the end of their time during their internship, and then they can choose to come and work at Amazon or not. That's up to them, but there will be a role that's available. We also have our consumer internship as well, where this is come in and find out about our consumer business. So they're all on our job page, and these things happen. And come along to an insight day, find out more about them. But there's just so much to do. Sorry, Alistair, I just banged on a bit.
That's good. No, that's excellent, Julian. No, there's so many good, useful tips there and things that people need to know. James, what's your top tips then?
Mine's is you're not alone. That there's a huge community out there of veterans that are in employment. Your employment advisors, reach out, speak to them. learn what worked, what didn't work. Don't make the same mistakes they did. You know, there's loads of people reach out all the time over different platforms, and you know, I've never served with them, I don't know them, but I'll speak to them because they're from the same community as me. They've walked the same walk, they've had the same journey. You know, you're not alone out there. There's tons of us out there that will help and assist you into new roles or point you in the right direction.
Yeah, very good. That's a very good point. And Hazel?
So I've got a couple. So own your own transition
Yeah.
from the military. I've said it a few times now. It's really important. You don't have to accept every job offer that is made to you. Just because it's like, okay, I've been trying to get a job and now somebody's made an offer, so I have to accept. Of course, if you want to, go ahead. But sometimes I think because of the careers that we have had, we maybe feel flattered that we are being offered a job. We feel imposter syndrome in some way. So you don't have to accept A, the job, or B, the offer that they are giving to you. I think the other thing that I would add about Amazon specifically is that you are coming into a place where if you you go into a safety team, for example, and you have the prerequisite qualifications and you don't particularly enjoy it, it's not uncommon here for people to be in a role for months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then move to a different department. That is routine business. In the military, normally we are used to doing 2-3 year assignments, something like this. So yeah, there's diversity here in terms of roles and the length of time you'll spend. But yeah, own your transition is my tip.
Very interesting. Now, those are really excellent things. I mean, actually, just to sort of to add to them, really. I mean, I appreciate we've actually covered an awful lot of ground over the last 55 minutes. I mean, I would say there's a couple of things. One, okay, do the homework, do the preparation, do take responsibility, as Hazel just said. Take ownership of your own transition. I think the point about networking has been well made. Yeah, and talk to people. Do network. I mean, sometimes people get worried about what that phrase really means. People are very used to it, actually, even if they're not actually don't actually know they're doing it. I think it's an interesting thing, and somebody mentioned this to me a long time ago. But an employer at an interview, or when you're putting an application in, certainly an interview, is looking for three things: can they do the job? First thing. Second thing, do you want the job? And the third thing is, will you fit in? And do you remember all those three of those things? I mean, clearly, by the time you've got to an interview, you'll show, yeah, you can do it. Actually, some people go into an interview and they think, well, actually, I'm going for this, but I might want that one. And then it can show. Fine, if you've got the other one to go for. But that third point, will you fit in? We're all I think we can actually be quite, say, chameleon-like about moving to a different environment. That's what we really ideally need to be. Because don't look back too much. As I said before, but embrace those service connections, everything we've learned. Don't ditch it because it's priceless, frankly, but don't let that dominate the way you conduct yourselves. So do fit in, be ready to move on. And the last thing really is have confidence. Crikey, I'm not going to repeat all the things, all the skills, the formal skills and the other skills, etc., more life skills that everyone has acquired, whether it's in more general terms, but in the leadership, the management, in the all the training, all of that stuff. Remember, you've got all that under your belt, and which is particularly valuable. So have confidence when you're going forward. Don't be put off. Wow. So I think we have actually covered a lot. We've just got a couple more minutes to go. Before I sort of sum up, is there any other last minute points anyone wants to say about anything we've talked about, really, or any other last questions which people want to throw at us? And thank you very much for all of those questions. They were really excellent, which have come in during the course.
I would just emphasize about LinkedIn and just say, connect with us on LinkedIn. We're all on LinkedIn. Don't necessarily expect an answer straight away, because I've got quite a few connections on LinkedIn, but we're always posting stuff that is that's relevant. So follow people. Don't be afraid of LinkedIn. It's a really, really brilliant tool. Companies are using that to recruit people. At Amazon, we are going out, so you might not apply for a job, but you might be contacted by a recruiter because of your profile on LinkedIn. So really utilize that tool, because it's absolutely key to your job search. And own your transition. emphasize enough what Hazel says. You know, we have this saying again at Amazon about owning your career. Well, this is just the first step in owning your career, is owning your transition.
Brilliant. Now, great stuff. It's a great last point to sort of to finish up on. So everybody, hopefully you've really enjoyed that. It's been just about an hour. We've covered a lot of ground. As I said at the beginning, we're in interesting times. It is actually quite a good job seekers market right now, but that could change. So watch this space. Keep an eye on what happens with the announcements about economy and employment and all of those things. So that might change over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. But certainly right now, Amazon, wow, what an amazing organization to join if you get the chance when you apply. So I think that's about it. Have a great rest of the day and a weekend, everybody. We'll be back on this in about 4 weeks or so. A very exciting next topic, which we'll talk about close to the time. But until then, please continue to give any feedback, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. And it's certainly, we've enjoyed it here, having our conversation. And thank you very much indeed for the questions. And have a great weekend. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye for now.